Friday, October 20th, 2017, 9:45 a.m. Inside a sprawling 87-hectare manufacturing plant in Elizabeth, South Australia, a deep, mechanical siren blares across the factory floor. But this isn't a shift change, and it isn't a fire drill. It is the sound of an execution. Surrounded by generations of proud auto workers, a single, metallic red Holden Commodore sedan slowly inches its way down the final assembly line. As the tires touch the concrete floor, a worker reaches inside the cabin, turns the key, and shuts off the engine. With that single click, a century of national history came to a grinding, permanent halt. Sound interesting? Let us know. Like and subscribe to keep the interesting stories. This was the absolute end of car manufacturing in Australia. Overnight, a powerhouse $50 billion industrial sector one that had pumped wealth into the country's economy since World War II and supported over 200,000 jobs simply ceased to exist. For decades, Australia was part of an elite club. It was one of only 13 countries on Earth capable of taking a car completely from a blank sheet of paper, designing it, engineering it, stamping the steel, building the V8 engine, and driving it off the line. Cars weren't just transport down under. They were a national religion. Yet, in a brutal 4-year window, the three giants holding up the entire nation, Ford, Toyota, and Holden, all pulled the plug. Factories were gutted, machinery was sold for scrap, and an entire workforce was cast aside. How does an entire multi-billion-dollar domestic industry just evaporate? Was it a case of lazy corporate suicide, a sudden shift in global economics, or a cold-blooded political betrayal? To understand how Australia completely lost its ability to build cars, we have to go back to a time when the country built the toughest machines on the planet and look at the fatal blind spots that doomed them from the very start. The Golden Age and the uniquely Aussie beast. To understand how the industry fell apart, you have to understand how deeply it was woven into the fabric of daily life down under. Rewind to late November 1948. Australia's Prime Minister, Ben Chifley, stands before a packed crowd of dignitaries and journalists. A curtain drops to reveal a smooth, modest sedan, the Holden 215. Chifley smiles, looks at the cameras, and famously declares, "She's a beauty." The media labeled it Australia's own car, and it wasn't just corporate marketing, it was a literal necessity. Before World War II, Australia relied heavily on imported vehicles from Great Britain and Europe. But there was a massive problem. Those cars were designed for smooth, paved highways. Australia, on the other hand, was a vast, unforgiving continent dominated by corrugated dirt tracks, deep river crossings, and brutal outback corrugated roads that literally shook European suspensions to pieces. Aussie engineers realized that if you wanted a car to survive the outback, you had to build it tough. Local factories began stamping out heavy-duty, rear-wheel drive sedans with rugged suspensions and large, understressed 6-cylinder and V8 engines that could pull heavy trailers through 40-degree heat without breaking a sweat. They even invented an entirely new automotive category, the ute, short for utility vehicle. Born from a famous 1930s letter written by a farmer's wife who wanted a vehicle comfortable enough to go to church on Sunday and carry our pigs to market on Monday, the coupe utility became a foundational symbol of the nation's blue-collar workforce. By the 1970s, automotive manufacturing was booming. 1 in every 10 manufacturing workers in the country was tied directly to the car industry. And because the market was protected by massive government tariffs and taxes designed to make imported foreign cars much more expensive, local builders had an absolute monopoly on the population's wallets. This environment sparked one of the fiercest, most tribal consumer rivalries in global history: Ford versus Holden. Every October, the entire nation stopped to watch these two brands wage war at the legendary Bathurst 1000 race around Mount Panorama. Dealerships lived by a simple rule: win on Sunday, sell on Monday. You were either a Ford family or a Holden family. Switching sides was viewed as nothing short of treason. The cash was flowing, factories were expanding, and the executive boardrooms in Melbourne and Adelaide felt utterly bulletproof. But while Ford and Holden were busy fighting each other for domestic dominance, a silent, tectonic shift was happening across the ocean. A new generation of highly efficient competitors was quietly preparing to invade, and the Australian kings were completely blind to the threat. The shift, when the blind spots caught up. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the towering walls that protected Australia's car industry began to crack. The federal government started aggressively lowering import tariffs, exposing the local giants to a hyper-competitive global marketplace. And right as the gates opened, consumer tastes did something the local manufacturers never anticipated. They completely evolved. For 50 years, the default Australian dream was a massive rear-wheel drive V8 or 6-cylinder sedan parked in the driveway. But a new generation of buyers wanted something entirely different. They wanted smaller, fuel-efficient compacts for congested city streets, and increasingly, they wanted practical, elevated sports utility vehicles, or SUVs. But the local boardrooms at Ford and Holden were stubborn. They had spent decades making billions off large platforms like the Ford Falcon and the Holden Commodore. Instead of redesigning their factories to build local, cutting-edge compacts and SUVs from scratch, they doubled down on their aging sedans, pouring hundreds of millions into minor cosmetic refreshes. When they did try to address the booming compact and SUV market, their parent companies in Detroit forced a fatal shortcut. They imported cheap, subpar global models from Europe and Asia, slapped local Australian badges on the grille, and called it a day. None highlighted this failure more than the Holden Captiva. Intended to fight off the foreign SUV invasion, the imported Captiva suffered from such horrific engineering defects and catastrophic reliability issues that Aussie consumers completely turned on it. It was universally mocked, earning the permanent, devastating nickname, the Craptiva. Every unreliable import that wore a local badge eroded a sacred trust that had taken 50 years to build. Australian buyers realized they no longer had to tolerate subpar quality out of national loyalty. Meanwhile, foreign competitors, particularly from Japan and Thailand, flooded the market with bulletproof, highly advanced machinery at prices local factories couldn't dream of matching. By 2016, a historic milestone was crossed. The top-selling vehicle in Australia was no longer a locally built sedan. It was the imported Toyota Hilux. Year after year, the domestic market share for the local manufacturers plummeted. Production lines slowed to a crawl, and the factories began bleeding massive amounts of cash. Yet, the industry managed to survive on a fragile life support system, hundreds of millions of dollars in annual government subsidies. But in late 2013, a dramatic political shift in the nation's capital would pull the plug on that life support, setting off an explosive corporate train wreck. The political execution and the train wreck. By late 2013, the bleeding couldn't be ignored anymore. Ford Australia had already raised the white flag, announcing they would close their manufacturing operations by 2016. The entire weight of the industry now rested on Holden and Toyota. Holden was locked in desperate behind-the-scenes negotiations with the government. They made it completely clear, without a long-term guarantee of co-investment and hundreds of millions in taxpayer subsidies, to cushion the soaring Australian dollar, local manufacturing was mathematically impossible. They needed certainty by Christmas. But in September, a newly elected, fiscally conservative coalition government took power in Canberra, and they were determined to draw a hard line in the sand. The breaking point arrived on December 10, 2013. During a fiery, shouting match in question time, the newly minted federal treasurer, Joe Hockey, decided he was done playing diplomatic games. He slammed his hand down, looked directly toward the opposition, and publicly challenged the automotive giant.
In calling on Holden to come clean with the Australian people about their intentions here, right? We want them to be honest about it. We want them to be fair dinkum. Because if I was running a business and I was committed to that business in Australia, I wouldn't be saying that I haven't made any decision about its future.
It was an unprecedented, high-stakes game of political chicken. Hockey openly declared that the government would not be held to ransom with taxpayers' money. He essentially called Detroit's bluff on a national stage. He expected Holden to back down and negotiate. He was dead wrong. The corporate executives at General Motors headquarters in Detroit didn't hesitate. They didn't schedule another meeting, and they didn't counter-offer. Within 24 hours of Joe Hockey's public dare, Detroit pulled the plug. On December 11th, they announced that Holden would abandon all vehicle manufacturing in Australia by 2017. The political dare had backfired in the most catastrophic way imaginable. But the worst was yet to come. The collapse of Holden didn't just mean the death of one brand. It triggered a fatal domino effect that mathematically doomed every other car builder left on the continent. Car manufacturing relies on an incredibly intricate, shared ecosystem of local component suppliers. A factory can't build a car if there is no one left to stamp the steel brackets, forge the exhaust pipes, or cast the brake pads. With both Ford and Holden exiting, the local component suppliers lost their economy of scale. They could no longer stay profitable. Toyota, the last giant standing, watched the local supply chain disintegrate around them. They realized that without local parts, it would be physically impossible to build cars down under. Just 2 months later, in February 2014, Toyota was forced to announce their own departure. The house of cards had completely collapsed. In a matter of weeks, a political showdown had effectively executed a $50 billion national industry, leaving a trailing path of economic destruction that would reshape the country forever. The aftermath and the modern tragedy. When the final car rolled off the line in October 2017, the immediate shockwaves tore straight through the heart of Australia's working-class communities. Politicians scrambled to downplay the damage, claiming the economy would easily absorb the workforce. But on the ground, the reality was a slow-motion economic disaster. The immediate closure of the big assembly plants displaced thousands of workers. But the real tragedy took place in the shadows of the secondary industries. The small, family-owned engineering firms, the specialized glass manufacturers, the seat trimmers, and the logistics companies that formed the invisible backbone of the automotive ecosystem. In regions like Northern Adelaide and Geelong, entire generational lines of manufacturing knowledge were cut. Fathers, sons, and daughters who had worked the same assembly lines for 40 years found their highly specialized skills suddenly worth zero in a modern economy. Economic studies estimated that the wider automotive collapse directly and indirectly wiped out between 50,000 and 200,000 jobs across the country. But Australia didn't just lose jobs, it lost its sovereign engineering capability. The high-value talent, the advanced design teams, the materials engineers, the industrial specialists who knew how to turn raw steel into precision machinery either packed their bags for Detroit, Germany, and Japan, or retrained into entirely different fields. A Tier 1 industrial capability built up over a century vanished in less than a decade. Today, the physical remnants of this $50 billion empire sit as ghostly monuments to a bygone era. The sprawling manufacturing hubs that once echoed with the deafening roar of industrial stamping presses, the hiss of pneumatic tools, and the chatter of thousands of proud workers are eerie, cavernous voids. While some sectors of these massive sites have been carved up for commercial warehouses or redeveloped into housing estates, large portions have sat empty, slowly rusting away. And the ultimate irony? Australia is still a car-obsessed nation. Every single week, tens of thousands of shiny new SUVs, family sedans, and dual-cab utes are unloaded from massive cargo ships, docking at ports in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. The roads are packed with vehicles. The dealerships are making billions. But as you watch the traffic crawl by, a bittersweet truth becomes impossible to ignore. 100% of the money spent on these vehicles now flows directly out of the country. Australia remains one of the largest consumer car markets on the planet, but it is completely incapable of building a single one of them. The cost of failing to adapt. The death of the Australian car industry wasn't caused by a single bad decision, a single bad car, or a single political speech. It was a perfect, devastating storm. It was the story of corporate stubbornness from global boards in Detroit who failed to see that the world was moving on. It was a failure to realize that national sentimentality cannot protect you forever if your product falls behind global standards. And finally, it was a cold, unsentimental political execution that failed to understand just how fragile a tightly woven manufacturing ecosystem truly is. When the dust settled, Australia became an accidental pioneer, a case study in what happens when an advanced nation completely surrenders its heavy industrial base to the forces of global outsourcing. It stands as a chilling warning for every global brand and every modern economy. No matter how deep your heritage runs, no matter how fiercely a nation loves your name, and no matter how many billions you are worth today, if you fail to read the room, if you fail to adapt to a changing world, your entire empire can vanish in the blink of an eye.